Chapter 4. Framed in the doorway of room 1428 of the Dell Hotel at 12:33 that day was a very large boy wearing a rather tight navy blue shirt with a monogrammed pocket and an equally tight pair of dark blue shorts that reached the tops of his knees. The lower parts of his legs were covered with a pair of white socks with navy blue piping that reached the bottom of his knees. His face was a little pudgy, and the skin looked so soft that LaFay imagined that it must have been bathed in 23 different lotions and then had 13 different creams massaged into it with loving care. She was wrong. It was 24 different lotions. But it was the hair. My God, the hair. That was most shocking of all. Thick, dark brown and swept back into an enormous quiff. It was so stiff that it looked more like spun sugar. How long, LaFay wondered, does it take to get your hair to look like that each morning? And even more to the point, why? She couldn't take her eyes off the top of his head. She'd never met such a sweet-smelling, soft-skinned, quiffy person in shorts before. "You must be McNally, the poor girl," said the boy, pushing past her and walking uninvited into her room. "I see they've put you in one of the cheapest rooms. More of a closet, really, isn't it?" He wrinkled his nose as though he'd just detected a particularly bad smell. "I'm Graham Large," he said, which was true. "I'm the one who's going to beat you all in the competition tomorrow," he added, sounding rather too sure of himself. "My father is David Large, owner of Large Lunches. I expect you've heard of him." No," said LaFay politely. Graham had been looking to see whether LaFay had brought a typewriter or laptop with her to practice on, and, concluding that she'd brought next to nothing with her, let alone a keyboard, turned and stared at her. If you were to ask LaFay what color his eyes were, she wouldn't remember. He may have been glaring directly at her face, but her eyes were still fixed on the HAIR. "Sponsors always like to have a poor person in the finals of a competition, whatever it's for," said Graham Large, with that nasty, nasty sneer that came naturally. "They fix local and regional competitions to make sure it happens. It makes them look like a kind, caring company. But there's no way the poor kid ever wins. How could you? You didn't get this far on talent or merit. It's just rigged so that you can make up the numbers." LaFay was confused. Firstly, she didn't see herself as being poor, and secondly, she knew that she had excellent keyboard skills. "We're not poor," she said, thinking of her friend Simon. Simon was so poor that he couldn't afford another name. He was simply Simon, as opposed to Simple Simon, the guy who met a pie man. And he lived with his family in an old abandoned greenhouse on some wasteland near the edge of Fishbone Forest. Only someone very poor or completely mad would go anywhere near Fishbone Forest, let alone live near there. It was the sort of place you'd go if you had absolutely nowhere else to go. Strange things happen in Fishbone Forest. Nasty things. The kind of things that people write about in books such as the next one in this series, Air of Mystery. Now, Simon and his family were really poor. Graham Large snorted. It was a contemptuous snort, but don't worry if you're not sure what contemptuous means. It was a piggy snort, too. "If you say so," he laughed, "though why anyone who wasn't poor would turn up dressed in those rags escapes me." Now, it was true that LaFay's dress had been Jackie's dress before she'd grown out of it, and that it had been their mother's before Jackie's, but it had been new when their mother had bought it, so it was less of a hand-me-down than some of the clothes LaFay wore. It was also true that it had a number of alterations and repairs done on it over the years, but Jackie had gone to a great deal of trouble to unpick and restitch some of the messier efforts at patching it up, and LaFay wasn't about to let some perfumed softy make fun of all the hard work her sister had gone to make her look nice for the competition. LaFay had gone red in the face. Her blood was boiling, and she was about to explode. What she meant to say next was, "Get out of my room, Large. I didn't invite you in here." What she actually said in her spluttering rage was, "Get out of my room, Lard," and then spluttered to a halt. Why? Because of the boy's expression the second the word lard came out. A look of horror crossed Graham Large's softy, perfumed face. His spun sugar quiff quivered. Quiffs do that sometimes. Perhaps that's how they got the name. His eyes, whatever the color they were, moistened. What LaFay didn't realize was that Lard, her slip of the tongue, was the nickname Graham Large hated most in the whole wide world. It was the name the other boys and girls had used to chant at school before his parents had taken him out of the school system and hired a non-teasing, one-on-one private tutor to teach him at home. "You," he said, sweeping past LaFay with a trail of scent and striding into the corridor, "have just made yourself a powerful enemy, a very powerful one," which was followed by a large sniff. No sooner had LaFay shut the door, with some satisfaction, it must be admitted, than there was another knock on it. "Yes," she said. "Room service," said a voice. This time LaFay went up on tiptoe and looked through the peephole to see who was out there. Through the distorted fisheye lens she could see a man in a red uniform with big brass buttons holding a silver tray. She opened the door excitedly. The young man brought in a delicious-smelling chicken sandwich on toasted white bread and a steaming mug of hot chocolate on the tray, which he placed on the bed. "Thank you," said LaFay, and when the man handed her a piece of paper she signed it with the pen he offered her. "Thank you very much." It was one of the best meals LaFay had ever had, and did she feel guilty that she was eating it without Jackie and the others? No, because once she'd smuggled them up there, they could all order as many chicken sandwiches and mugs of hot chocolate as they wanted. Just before 1 o'clock, when LaFay was hurrying to the bellhop suite for the first event on the tap and type itinerary, Jackie, holding Fergal dressed as a baby, and Albie and Joshua, doing their best to look like one and the same person, were climbing off the bus along with all the other passengers. It wasn't that they'd reached their destination. Far from it. They were on a very, very long fenced road, which appeared to be in the middle of nowhere, with fields on either side, stretching far into the distance, without a single house or turn-off in sight. And there in front of them was a hole in the road, a big one. This wasn't one of those holes in the road that you can drive over and everyone in the car feels funny in the pit of his or her stomach. This was the kind of hole that, if the bus driver attempted to drive over it, he would actually end up driving the bus into it, and everyone would end up screaming, "Ah!" except perhaps for Fergal, who, hindsight tells us, was prone to be as silent as a sack of rocks when falling any great distance, as they plummeted into the general direction of the center of the earth with a capital E. The bus driver was attempting to lean over the edge of the hole to get an idea of just how deep it was, but was too frightened to get close enough to the edge to get a proper look. "It weren't there this morning," he kept on saying. The hole in the road can't have been there that long, because there wasn't much of a line of traffic in either direction. The bus was only 3 vehicles away from it, and there was only a handful of cars on the other side of the hole, facing in the opposite direction. A wisp of black smoke drifted out of the hole and hung in the air like a sooty question mark. "Who do you think made it?" Albie asked Jackie. He'd heard about such holes appearing out of nowhere, but never actually seen one before. He was running around Joshua in circles in the hope that if he kept moving, they might have the appearance of being one person with a blurred outline. The actual effect was of one of a pair of almost identical twins running around the other. "Who or what, my boy?" said the man with the mustache who'd been sitting next to Jackie throughout the journey. "You mean aliens?" gasped Albie. "I wish I knew. These holes have been springing up everywhere these past 6 months. No one seems to know why or how." Once again his mustache said nothing. In keeping with pretending to be a baby to avoid needing a ticket to travel, Fergal crawled on all fours to the edge of the gigantic hole and peered into the vast nothingness below. "Careful," called Jackie, running after him. "It's a long way down," Fergal whispered. "It weren't there this morning," said the bus driver. I did mention he kept on saying that. "How do you propose to get us across, driver?" demanded a gray-haired woman passenger. "We ain't never getting across that, lady," he said. But we've a typing competition to get to," said Jackie urgently. The man with the mustache eyed her with interest, but said nothing. "And I am due to be a matron of honor at a wedding," said the gray-haired woman indignantly. "Well, it weren't there this morning," said the bus driver. "If he'd been wearing a cap, I'm sure he'd have taken it off and scratched his head, but he wasn't, so he didn't." "Then we must get around it," Fergal blurted out, because he knew how important it was to LaFay to have her family there to cheer her on. The man with the mustache appeared at Jackie's side. "Really bright kid," he commented. The driver, who'd also heard the super baby's comment, shook his head. "There's no way I can get this bus around the edge of the hole," he said. "Who knows how soft the earth is in them fields? The whole thing might sink with us in it." "We can all wait till you've driven around it and get back in afterward," the gray-haired woman suggested. "That way the bus would be much lighter." "But I still might sink in it," muttered the driver. "There ain't no way I'm driving around it, and that's final, missus." "Maybe not," said the man with the mustache, "but we can all walk around and try to hitch a ride with the people in the cars on the other side. There's nothing they can do except turn back the way they came anyhow." "A brilliant idea," said Jackie. "Can you unload our luggage, please, driver?" While one group of passengers peered into the amazing hole, another argued with the bus driver to let them have their luggage. It wasn't easy. I'm only authorized to open the luggage compartment and release luggage at the end of a journey. See, he explained, making life difficult for everyone. But surely there are special rules for if there's an accident, asked Jackie. Exactly, said the gray-haired woman. Now get on with it, my good man. I have a wedding to attend. But there hasn't been an accident, the driver protested. There would have been if you hadn't stopped in time, said Jackie. But there's nothing in the rules about unloading the luggage if an accident's been avoided, whined the driver. Are there any other circumstances when you're allowed to release the luggage, asked the man with the mustache, apart from when reaching our destination or in the event of an accident, I mean? In the event of a breakdown, said the driver. So, if the bus won't go, then you can let us have our luggage, asked Albie, coming to a halt in his orbit around Joshua. If suitable, alternate, began the driver, but Albie and Joshua weren't listening. They were already sprinting over to the bus. Well, technically speaking, what with the line of cars now forming behind us and 3 cars and a huge hole in front, this bus can't go anywhere now, can it? Jackie McNally asked politely. That's as may be, said the driver, but there's a difference between a car breaking down and... Ah, said the man with the mustache as a thought suddenly struck him. What if the bus was stuck in a patch of mud? The engine was working perfectly and everything, just that the wheels were slipping in the mud and the bus was going nowhere. The driver paused, then a smile slowly spread across his face. Then I'd probably unload the luggage, even though the bus itself ain't reached its destination, been in an accident, nor broken down. Exactly, said the man triumphantly. Which is the same as what's happened here, declared the bus driver. Exactly, said Jackie, the man with the mustache, the gray-haired woman, and Fergal in his nappy all together. Then let's get unloading, declared the driver, striding toward his machine just as Albie and Joshua McNally appeared from the other side of the bus, looking sheepish. To anyone viewing Albie and Joshua front on, he or she'd only be able to tell that Joshua was looking sheepish because Albie was standing directly behind him, flat against him, to create the impression of one double-thick human being requiring just one ticket rather than that of 2 almost identical twins. At least that was the idea. You've got a flat tire, mister, Joshua told the driver. This bus is going nowhere. The driver let out a loud and multi-toned groan, surprisingly like the sound a set of half-inflated bagpipes might make if you sat on them, expelling the remaining air, and hurried off to investigate. When she thought no one was looking, Jackie prodded Joshua in the ribs. He was going to unload the luggage anyway, she said in a harsh whisper. But we didn't know that, did we? Came Albie's voice from the back of Joshua's head. And it's not as if we did anything to the engine or anything. True, Jackie agreed and smiled. Not 10 minutes later, Jackie, Albie, and Joshua were skirting around the very large, very deep hole with the man with the mustache. Jackie was carrying Fergal to keep up the pretense for the time being. Joshua and Albie were carrying their trunk between them, and as well as his own small suitcase, which he referred to as his valise. The man with the mustache carried the McNally's other case. The mustache carried nothing. If something's funny once, it's funny 1,000 times, as my cousin Claire said the day the Lapahani Indians buried her alive to prevent her from telling them any more knock-knock jokes. But you'll hear no more jokes about this man with the mustache's mustache. Honestly, perhaps it would be easier if I gave you his name, and now is an appropriate time because it was just about now that he told it to Jackie. My name's Peach, by the way, he said. We're the McNallys, said Jackie. I'm Jackie. And I'm her brother Fergal, and I'm not really a baby, said Fergal. So you can put me down now, Jax. Jackie stopped and put her little brother down. And we're 2 almost identical twins, Albie and Joshua said. Albie and Joshua, said Albie. I'm Joshua, said Albie. And I'm Albie, said Joshua, and we're not really one of the same person at all. I never doubted it for a second, said Mr. Peach politely. They continued skirting the edge of the hole. It was a large one, remember. Now that she had her hands free, Jackie insisted that she carry her own case, but Peach insisted that he continue to carry it for her. Fergal dropped back behind the others and peered into the hole again. What on earth could have made such a thing? Had it been something from above or something from below? Whatever it was, Fergal was very glad that it hadn't opened up just as the bus had been driving over that very spot. He hoped that no one else had been driving over that spot at that time. Fergal stopped in his tracks. He felt sure that he'd heard something. Shh, he said. Jackie carried on talking to Mr. Peach and Albie to Joshua. Shh, he said in capital letters this time. They shushed. Help, said a strange and tiny voice. Fergal gasped. I think it's coming from down there. He pointed into the hole.